which is a confirmation. We are live, right?
On Periscope, yeah. Roadshow.
Oh, the Twitters can see us. YouTube, coming online.
Twitch is live.
Fucking Twitch.
What a shame.
Bezos.
Did you see that Trump made an account?
Yeah,
He's doing this rally.
on Twitch.
Yeah.
What was the chat room look like?
There were no mods.
There were no mods.
So you can imagine.
There were no mods. All right. Okay, we're online on Twitter. Okay, go ahead. Go for it, Drew. I think we're live enough.
All right, we think we're live. Welcome to Louisiana gubernatorial all-party. Welcome to Jungle Primary, Saturday night with the Decision Desk HQ. Congratulations on all of your life choices. Let's see, who do we have here tonight? Scott Tranter is with us. Matt Shore. The Alexes are back. Al Dunstan and Podcool. I'm Drew McCoy, and we'll be joined a little later on by our Director of Elections, Brendan Finnegan, as well. We're starting to see the first early votes come in, handful from around the state. Just to fill you in on where we are tonight and why we're here. Louisiana is different because it's Saturday night and we're doing elections. It's an all-party primary, so everybody runs in one big primary. If somebody gets more than 50% of the vote, they win. That's it. It's done. If not, the top two candidates go on to another Saturday night vote. That'll be exciting, November 16th. Right now we have John Bel Edwards as the incumbent governor, Democrat, one of the few governors from the Democratic governors in the South, depending on what you think about Virginia and North Carolina being the deep South. He's being challenged by a number of candidates, but the top two big people we're watching tonight are two Republicans. Eddie Risponi, who is a businessman, political novice, very much in the Donald Trump mode of getting involved. Spent about $10 million of his own money to run a bunch of ads, mostly against Ralph Abraham, who is a physician, but also a congressman. So those are the two Republicans, their goal. And as you saw probably last night, President Trump is down there drumming up turnout. Doesn't really matter to national Republicans who wins. They just want to make sure they keep Edwards below the 50% threshold tonight and live to fight another day in about a month. Let's start with Alex Podcool. I think you have a look at what we're going to be talking about tonight and some of the metrics we're going to be applying to this race.
Yeah, so thanks, Drew. Thanks for kicking it off. So right now we're just watching some of the early votes come in. I will say we're 50,000 votes ahead of the New York Times right now.
Always a good thing.
Always a good thing. Yeah, Drew just did a good overlook as to what this campaign is and what we're really watching here. Bel Edwards is pretty popular in the state. It let this Republican fighting for the number 2 spot right now has created some interesting moments with President Trump standing on stage next to both of the candidates. That's usually not something you see. A campaign rally features two people who are running in a race against one another, both getting co-equal endorsements from the president. But tonight, if Alex Al Dunstan's there, he might want to walk us through some of the vote goals that we have planned to cover tonight. Mostly what we're watching for is whether or not John Bel Edwards crosses the 50% threshold. And we have some scenarios where we're going to cover what John Bel Edwards needs to hit in each of the parishes for him to actually reach that goal. So if Alex Al Dunstan kind of wants to talk us through some of the overall scenarios and some of the overall strategies that we're following here tonight.
Yeah, so we shared on Twitter our link for the parish tracker. Basically, this sheet will allow us to see, as the night goes on, how John Bel Edwards is doing parish by parish, and have a good idea of whether he's going to be able to hold off on the runoff, or if we will have the runoff in November. Right now, there's some early bugs on the sheet where, for instance, an assumption apparently 344% of the vote is in. But as soon as we fix that up, this will end up being pretty interesting as the night goes on. In terms of turnout, we have 3 different scenarios going. Low turnout, mid turnout, high turnout. Low turnout is roughly 1 million. That mid turnout scenario is about 1.15 million, which would be pretty similar turnout to 2015. And then on the high end, the most that we can realistically expect, I think, is 1.3 million. So we'll keep track of that as the night goes on. We'll have a good sense of what turnout is going to look like, and then also whether John Bel Edwards will be able to fend off the runoff. After we've determined that, then obviously the next interesting thing is which of the 2 Republican candidates would make the runoff, if there is one.
I just wanted to jump in on the turnout thing, Alex. I don't know if you've modeled it against the turnout for early voting. By most people's estimation, it's a little over 300,000, which is pretty high. It's higher than any other non-presidential year, and about 2/3 of the normal presidential turnout in early voting. So the question becomes, with early voting, as it always is that indicative of higher turnout, or are you cannibalizing people that come out day of? So that's something to watch for in terms of the turnout number. And generally, I don't know what your feeling is, but just in talking to people, a higher turnout tends to benefit the Republicans for pushing this to runoff. Is that something you've looked at?
I don't know if I have a strong prior on that.
Okay.
I know that in terms of the early vote, the point that you made, yes. So early turnout was pretty high. Usually, how this works is when there's higher early turnout, it's not necessarily predictive of total turnout, because as time has gone on, early voting has become a lot more popular, and so oftentimes what happens is that you're going to see some cannibalization of the election day vote early, where people will just vote early. They were already going to turn out. They
Right.
just, instead of doing it on normally Tuesday night, or rather Tuesday, today is Saturday instead, they do it early. So not too predictive on that front.
Okay, and just looking at what had come before polling, I think either Scott or Podcool may have had something on polling as well about what's leading into this race.
Yeah, just so everyone can see it, there's been a bunch of polling that's come out leading up to the election. Everything from some IVR stuff to some online and some traditional live caller phone stuff. It mostly has John Bel Edwards. If you average out the last 6 below 50% in the runoff, and it has, I'm going to probably butcher everyone's name, Aram and Rasponi sitting in, high teens, low 20s, depending on which poll you're looking at. So again, the big question tonight is it's not a race to see who's going to win. It's a race to see if John Bel Edwards can avoid the runoff. What'll be interesting, I guess, is, we were talking about turnout earlier. A significant amount of money has been spent on this race, and we've seen in previous elections we've covered an increase in turnout, partly because the president has brought attention to it, and everyone's kind of been pretty motivated around elections this season. So yeah, Louisiana, generally speaking, more Republicans than Democrats, so higher turnout does favor the Republicans. What that means for John Bel Edwards, I'm not exactly sure until we start getting 20 to 30% of these precincts in. But all the polling indicates it's not going to be a race to see if any of these Republicans can beat the Democrat. It's all about, can John Bel Edwards get over 50%. Thanks for bearing with us. We had a small, I guess, production studio error, so we've had to readjust some of our visuals tonight. But just so everyone knows, this is all leading up until the Democratic primaries next year. So tonight, what we're playing around with, and we shared it with everyone on Twitter, the vote goals and vote projections. Those turnout models were done by us here. We'll talk about those later on in the year on how those are done, as well as we're going to have live precinct results tonight, and we'll throw those up as they come in. Again, we don't expect them to be too interesting, but precinct results nonetheless are kind of the cutting edge for this cycle. So we're looking forward to that. Drew, I can't remember. We have some of these videos. Which commercial? Were there any interesting commercials we should show everyone while some of these early votes come in?
Well, I know the one that was getting a lot of play was the Risponi ad with the Duck Dynasty guy.
Oh yeah, can we pull that one up, Austin? Are you okay?
Sort of a blast from the GOP past the last couple of years.
Yeah, we always gotta love it when they pull out Duck Dynasty, right?
Who doesn't love a big beard? Sharp dressed men. But yeah, but again, that shows you it was playing up on the CEO aspect of things.
Yep.
It was a biography ad. I'm sure we'll see in a second here. Very much with the Duck Dynasty guy doing the sort of the affirmation for Risponi. Tried to do a little humor as you would probably expect when you have a Duck Dynasty guy in there. On the ad front, that really was Risponi's big ace in the hole here. I think when this campaign started, he was behind Abraham, based on name recognition. But again, if you're willing to spend $9 to $10 million on ads, you can buy name recognition, and that's an important thing. And as the campaign has gone on, we've seen Risponi, at least in polling, pulling ahead of Abraham for a while
Eddie
there.
always
All right, we got this
says, "You want
ad.
different,
Everyone's got
you
to
gotta do different."
That's right, Willie.
That's why I'm voting for you, Eddie. Louisiana needs something different to turn our state around. And you're a
How
businessman
did
like
you
me,
Risponi?
pro-Trump, conservative, politically incorrect outsider, and you're a Christian.
You know, Willie, we are a limelight. Maybe I ought to grow a beard, get me one of them bandanas. Maybe I'll just stick with the lapel pin.
Good call, Eddie.
Do different. Eddie Risponi for governor.
So good.
Is it? I mean, that's definitely gonna win somebody something, right? All right, Austin, can we switch back to the results? It looks like we got a few more things in.
Quite a few things.
All right, you want to kind of bring us up to speed here? Pod cool.
Yeah, so I mean, right now the night is young. We're at 6% of precincts reported, 264 of just under 4,000 precincts. John Bel Edwards in the lead, just at under 42%. We're still tracking this, but everybody check out DecisionDeskHQ.com. Check out the embeds to look at the map and. But yeah, we're getting the numbers in right now. Risponi is in the lead in a few parts of the southern part of the state, in a few parishes in the southern part of the state. John Bel Edwards doing pretty well across the board. For example, in Allen Parish, where we have 20% of precincts reported, Edwards is up, but he's only at 40%. Again, we're watching the 50% threshold statewide throughout the evening. There are other places, as of the early vote reports, where Abraham is ahead pretty substantially. So if we look at on the western part of the state, in Vernon Parish, Abraham in that early vote, that first dump of precinct votes, Abraham's at 36%. But again, as we've learned, early vote not necessarily correlated with what the end of the evening is going to look like. But yeah, that's sort of what we're seeing right now. It's still early. We're at about just under, we're at about 180K votes in, but with a lot to go.
Sorry, we're just all looking at some of this stuff coming in. It's hard to say whether, I mean, we expect John Bel Edwards to pretty much win every county, but it's not winning every county. It's by how much. And so just looking at a few of these different turnout, interesting, like Jefferson. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott's saying
Yeah.
Jefferson, presumably because that's the only place right now Bel Edwards is above 50%.
Yeah. Anything was significant. Jefferson, we're projecting about, I mean, in 2015, Jefferson had about 100,000 votes. So that's a pretty big county for him to win, and that's the only one he's above 50% was significant. I mean, I guess LaSalle's one, and a few others, but nothing too big. I mean, East Baton Rouge is going to be big for him, and Ascension. Some of these mid ones are going to be interesting.
I think something that's been pretty interesting throughout this whole campaign is how much we've been hearing the name Bobby Jindal. Bell Edwards coming out.
Have we really heard a lot of Bobby Jindal?
Yeah. Bell Edwards was coming out because he's saying how he turned the deficit into a surplus in the state, and he's been doing pretty well. And then I believe it was the American Bridges Super PAC put out an ad tying Rispone to Bobby Jindal, essentially making it look like he was sending Valentines to him, just trying to tie him. I mean, it almost had echoes of people trying to tie John McCain to George W. Bush in the 2008 presidential election. It was pretty severe, and Jindal left office at pretty low approval ratings. And so I think people were trying to still see if they could take advantage of that low approval rating by tying some of these Republicans to that kind of position. Drew, have you been? Scott was laughing when I just said Bobby Jindal's name. Drew, have you been seeing Jindal come up in looking at this race?
Yeah, there's been some talk about it, but that's actually a really interesting point about, the anomaly of having a Democratic governor in the Deep South. The reason it got there is Bobby Jindal was so unpopular when he left office 4 years ago. And on top of that, it wound up being then Senator David Vitter was running, and Vitter had a number of personal scandals and issues. So it was a bit of a perfect storm that got John Bell Edwards into office in the first place. Now, he's run with it in 4 years and he's become very popular. And also, he's not exactly what you would call necessarily a traditional national Democrat at this point. He signed a restrictive abortion law. He did also expand Medicaid, which was very popular. The Republican candidates have both embraced that, but they said, well, it's running into fiscal issues and we'll do some reforms, and I'm sure we'll hear about waste, fraud, and abuse. But that was a popular thing, and that actually had a lot to do with Jindal's issues about his efforts to rework the state's hospital systems and things like that. So yeah, there was a bit of a storm, and I'm sure John Bell Edwards, like any politician, wants to go back to the greatest hits. You start with what got you there. But that is how we wound up with a Democrat, again, a little bit different than what we may see at the national level. But certainly he's run with that in the last 4 years to become quite popular. We'll see if it's popular enough tonight and possibly in a month or so.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the dimensions, I guess, ideologically, that this race is sort of shaping up to be. I think your summary at the top, Drew, did a good job sort of outlining kind of the differences on the Republican side between Rispone and Abraham. I mean, Abraham is more or less kind of the establishment figure here, and people have been pointing to his voting attendance record in Congress, as he, I believe, was the most absent lawmaker in the 116th Congress, and so I know that came up in the gubernatorial debate in the last round, in the last debate that they had. People were pointing the finger at him for that, and he said something to the effect of, well, if I'm missing votes to get rid of John Bell Edwards out of office, then I'm going to continue to keep missing votes, which I don't know if that's exactly something you want to be bragging about on the campaign trail. But, I mean, as you said, John Bell Edwards signing into law one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. And so definitely that gives the Republicans very little space to run to the right of him on some of those issues. On other topics, John Bell Edwards was a leader along with the GOP legislature in giving teachers in the state their first raise in a number of years, and that seems to be a pretty popular policy among Louisianans. At least that's as I've been reading it in the newspapers, it seems pretty popular. I haven't seen polling numbers on that, but it just seems to be that we're in a lot of these cases just tying down to personality. It becomes establishment versus outsider, Rispone, Abraham on the right. But then also we're a little off the ideological map. But that's pretty much what we've come to expect from Louisiana politics lately.
Hey, so sure, it looks like we got some new stuff in. What should I be highlighting for everyone here?
Well, we are, excuse me, we are in the process of updating some new numbers now, and we're going to get those up on the vote goals sheet momentarily. But I would say, keep an eye on a few things. Number one, on the way that the current total votes compares to maybe some of our turnout scenarios. Those are certainly interesting. Also, keeping an eye on the way Edwards' current percentage relates to his outright win vote goal. These are all important things to keep an eye on as this rolls along, because obviously we're trying to see if Edwards can hit his threshold and save himself from a runoff. So this is what we're looking at as we move along here. But I'm going to try to get back to the nerdery here and make sure that we're updating this sheet correctly.
The nerdery.
Understand this. This sheet's specifically built for runoff, and these boxes up here will get a little more interesting as we get later into the night. But this is John Bell Edwards' outright win vote goal. In other words, this is what we project he needs to get in this parish, as I'm told, not county, parish, to get above 50%. So here's his current percentage. That's the vote goal to win outright. And there's the red GOP advantage. Here's how many votes occurred in 2015. Here's how many votes we're seeing currently. Here's the precincts including early vote. And here's the turnout model by county. So you can see we still think even a low turnout model, about 9,000 more votes left in, say, Acadia County. The counties we're most interested in, obviously East Baton Rouge, that's a big one, 119,000 votes in 2015. We have nothing in from there. Another big one, Jefferson. John Bell Edwards needs 46% in Jefferson. Currently, he's getting 54%, so he's actually trending above where he needs to be. And because of the size of the county, that can have, that can outweigh him being behind Jackson County, Iberville, all these smaller ones, Parish, sorry.
Yeah.
Etc. We got nothing in from Orleans. So, for those of you commenting on Twitter right now or in all these various chat rooms, because we're streaming everywhere, it's too early to tell whether John Bell Edwards is trending behind or not. I think we're going to need to see Orleans come in. We're going to need to see East Baton Rouge. And to be honest, I can tell these guys over here are looking at some of the precinct returns that we'll share with you in a moment. We'll have some comments on there. But it's too early to tell where this is going.
Yeah, Scott, I was gonna point out the East Baton Rouge point. So it's expected to make up roughly 10% of all the votes today. And so far, the early vote hasn't looked all that impressive for John Bell Edwards. East Baton Rouge is one place where he's expected to do pretty well. And so it'll be interesting to see when the early vote there drops, if he's above 60 or not there. That's one thing that I'm watching for.
Gotcha. Austin, you got something?
Yeah. Carry on.
Austin is frantically trying to put new views up.
Look at Slack. Did you see Drew's?
Yeah, we're not going to overlook the precincts yet because we're still waiting. Shore's putting some stuff in there. Yeah, it's too early. We're going to have to wait for a few more things before we can start making any conclusions. I mean, LaSalle. Yeah. Interesting. So, Win with JMC, who's infamous on Twitter, is talking about the African American turnout. So we have a map on that, so you can kind of get an idea of where that was. It's exactly what you expect. African American turnout, obviously in the southeast, right around New Orleans, some of the bigger cities. Caucasian turnout, white turnout, obviously in the northern part of the state. So it'll be interesting to see where some of this stuff pans out, especially when we compare the 2015 to 2016 turnout. 2016, obviously a presidential year. 2015, not a presidential year. John Bell Edwards in 2015 won the race with 56% against Senator Vitter, former Senator Vitter. And it's that southwestern part of the state that really turned out for him.
And we should note that the northeastern corner down into the central area, that's where Abraham's congressional district is. So that's an area, if you're looking for him to run up some totals, it should be in that upper northeastern part of the state.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting some questions here about the early vote. I don't know if it's decisive either way. I mean, Alex, what do you think? I don't think the early vote we can read too much from. Everything.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think it's decisive either way. One thing that has come up a lot on Twitch, specifically, one thing I never thought would come up while discussing elections is Twitch, but there you go. Is that the early vote tends to be in most states favorable for the Democrats, and so the fact that the early vote doesn't necessarily look like it's favorable for John Bell Edwards, does that mean that that he is down for the count? That's not what it means. I'm not sure if anyone has some expertise on early voting in Louisiana, but I think Louisiana may be one of the states that bucks that trend. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he's out. We definitely want to see some election day votes in, especially in some of the bigger parishes, before we make any conclusions.
I will say I did have a discussion with Brandon Finnegan, our election director, about that earlier tonight. It actually does tend to be more Democratic, anywhere from sort of the high single digits to the mid double digits, say 8 to 15% leaning Democrat. Based on the demographics they had so far, I believe by the end of the week, yesterday or Thursday, it was still trending Democratic, but at a lower rate than normal. It was more in the D +2 to 3 range. So it's still an advantage to Democrats, but it's not necessarily their normal advantage, or one that you would expect to see at this point. And so the expectation is it's a little more heavily Republican than you would normally see for a Louisiana race. What that means, again, we don't know. Are they then, cannibalizing their day of advantage? This is the problem we have with early voting. It's interesting. It's great for people who like convenience. It just creates all sorts of issues when you're trying to figure out what it means on election night, until you start to see day of come in and you can start to look at the trends and whether or not they're tracking together or there's a divergence.
When it comes to the vote count that's come in, just to let you guys know what I'm looking at here with this stuff, this is bad for Edwards so far for winning this outright tonight. But you can't count him out of that possibility without East Baton Rouge and Orleans coming in. Both of those parishes should report their early vote within the next 15 to 20 minutes. Then you'll get a really good idea. Okay, this is like roughly what we're going to see with the election day vote, just on a larger scale. I would be very concerned if I was Edwards if after East Baton Rouge and after Orleans come in, then the more Republican parishes like St. Tammany and the others that are outstanding come in and they pretty much negate it. If he's still at the very low 40s, number one, then he will not be obviously winning this outright tonight. I mean, when the election day vote comes in. And number two, if the Republican combined vote stays in the high 50s, he goes into a toss-up contest in a runoff. This is not going to be even lean Democratic at that point. So anyway, I'm going to jump back in and look. I'll pop in and let you guys know when I see some stuff from the larger critical parishes. But that's what I'm seeing so far, and where we are right now at making decisions on things for tonight.
Sounds good. Sure. It looks like not a whole lot has been updated lately. Last updated 9:35. Yeah, again, I mean, to reiterate what you were saying, Alex, I think I think we're gonna have to see like East Baton Rouge. We're gonna have to see Orleans. Yeah. Austin, can you switch us over to just the polling so we can kind of review that again for everyone here? We'll pull the polling up while we're waiting for some more stuff. Again, just to kind of reiterate from everybody, I don't know, Podcool, if you got any opinion. It's interesting to me. I mean, leading up to it, you can make an argument with the exception of John Bel Edwards' spry strategies back 10-8 to 10-9. He's been trending up right on the edge. And, you know, noting what Brandon was saying earlier, you know, he doesn't think at this point it's looking good for him for getting over 50. I hear him. I'm still interested in waiting to see some of these bigger cities turn out. Specifically, southeastern Louisiana, which is what really brought him over the top, got him 56% back in 2015. Again, if you want to see what some of that looks like, if we look at his 2015 turnout, it was really down here. It was really around here, southeastern, southwestern Louisiana, that really got him over the top. And basically allowed him to beat Vitter 56-43. So it'll be interesting to see where some of this stuff comes out.
Yeah, I think on the polling end of things, it's definitely we're going to be seeing how some of these undecideds go. I mean, in a series of the polls that were leading into the month of October, there were still about 10% undecideds, and so if those people show up and go Bel Edwards route, then it could be a good night for him. In a lot of the late polling, he was trending upward a little bit, but if you just look at his kind of average of polls leading up to the month of October, he was still just a little shy of the 50% threshold. Having said that, there are undecideds and there are things that called margins of error. So it looks like the 50% threshold was within the statistical margin of error on a lot of these polls for Bel Edwards. And I mean, if I'm a Democrat in the state of Louisiana, then that's probably a good sign. Right now, the race, according to some of the big prognosticators, seems to be a lean Dem state, but that all rests on him not reaching 50% tonight, pretty much. And so we're going to be watching that. On the other side of things, Abraham was doing very well in the polls in late August. Over the summer months, he was destroying Rispone, continued in August, and then once September was happening, it seemed to be then it was finally trending Rispone's direction from Abraham to Rispone. So the second place position, we're going to be watching very closely as well. Again, I know we said it at the top, but a very non-traditional endorsement from President Trump, given the odd nature of Louisiana, by him saying, just vote for any Republican. That's not something we see too much outside of the state of Louisiana. But yeah, no, Scott, I think you're right on watching these polls. Just everything's going to be pretty close.
Just looking at some of this stuff coming in, it looks like we got the first bit of. It looks like we got the first bit of Jefferson in. Is that right? Sure.
Looks that way. We're going to get another update here and get it reflected in that parish tracker.
And it looks like it's the early vote, and Edwards did pretty decent.
So, just so everyone knows, we're looking at Jefferson with 98,000 projected votes. John Bel Edwards is going above his vote goal here. We think there's what, 24,000 votes left there. Lafayette's another one.
No, that's 24,000 have reported.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So 60,000, 70,000 roughly.
Yeah.
East Baton Rouge, we got some coming in from there. underperforming there, but we think that's probably early vote. Well, it's only 299 in, so that's probably
No, yeah, that's just a single election day precinct. So nothing really to glean yet from there. Once they dump the early vote, we'll have a good idea.
yeah. So those are the big ones we're going to wait out to see kind of where this goes next.
One thing to note in a state like Louisiana is, we talk about individual parishes, obviously. It's a very spread out state when it comes to parishes, or in a different state would be called counties. Um, so the big ones definitely matter. The small ones do too, because they add up, and make up over half of the state. Now, what we've done is we have a weighted average based off of what we're expecting the vote to look like, the vote distribution to look like. So we're accounting for those things when once the currently favored marker comes up, it will take into account the distribution of the vote. And so if, let's say, Edwards is underperforming slightly in a lot of the smaller counties, but overperforms quite heavily parishes, and overperforms significantly in the top 3 or 4 parishes. You could see him be favored in our tracker, because at the end of the day, those will cancel out, and he would be slightly favored in that scenario. So we do account for that in this.
All right, so we got our first precinct results in. Again, we're playing around with this. Baton Rouge and Lafayette, those are the 2 areas in which John Bel Edwards really needs to pull it out. The blue means he's winning it, yellow a little bit early, red means he's losing it. So as you can see, we're going to wait for a lot of precincts, especially in this area. And certainly over New Orleans, if we get some of that. This is where John Bel Edwards really needs to pull it out if he's going to get above 50. We'll come back to this as we get more of these precinct results and able to update it a little bit more. But that's why we're saying it's a little bit early to call it for, well, John Bel Edwards is going to win, or at least coming ahead, but it's a little bit early to know whether he's going to get above 50 or not. All right, we're going to pull over some of this stuff.
So we're roughly at about 241,000 votes. That's, pretty close to getting to be what the expected day of was going to be in the 300,000 range. I'm sorry, the early vote. So this is really counties or parishes. See, now I've done it. Reporting that part, and then we'll start to see the day of. And again, that's really where the trends go. Yeah, we still need to see those bigger counties, but it's going to be a bit of an interesting evening, I think, to see not just if he makes it over the threshold, but which Republican.
While we're waiting for some of the important results to come in, shall we watch another campaign ad? There were a couple humorous ones. We already watched the Duck Dynasty one. There's also the oil rig.
Yeah, let's see the oil rig one.
with what could be a
what was it called again, Alex?
It's the one that has a maniacal laughter from John Bel Edwards. I don't remember the name off the top of my head.
Yeah, we got it. We're pulling it up right now.
4 years ago.
Here we go.
4 years ago, rigs just like this one employed thousands of people and supported thousands of families. Today, it produces nothing and employs no one. That's because John Bel declared war on the oil and gas industry. I'm Ralph Abraham, and that ends the day I'm elected governor. We're going to end these lawsuits, get our people back to work, and unleash the full power of Louisiana energy. I'm Ralph Abraham. Help is on the way.
What do we got next? I don't know, Drew. You're the one who watches these all the time. What do you think of that? That persuading anybody? Probably not. Drew?
You never really can tell what these are gonna go with. I think if anything, it's memorable.
Yeah.
That shot of Edwards, the maniacal laugh, as you called it. What are they trying to accomplish with these things, right? Are they really, trying to frame a candidate with a single ad as part of an overall strategy? I don't think one ad. There aren't too many silver bullets out there that you get with one ad. Sometimes they're self-inflicted. When a candidate comes out with a terrible ad, but I think it's just an ad. It's interesting that he was focused on Edwards and not Risponi, whereas a lot of Risponi's ads were either biographical or focusing on Abraham. So there was a different strategy, I think.
I mean, if you're him, I think everyone's afraid of Edwards, just getting above 50 and making this quick. So that's why.
Yeah, and I think it kind of reflects too that the two Republican campaigns, sort of had different goals, at least at the beginning, right? Abraham thought he was favored, and so it's all about beating John Bel Edwards, whereas Risponi's almost trying to take out Abraham. That's how he can get into the runoff.
Right. Yeah, you worry about the general later. I mean, if you don't survive this, if Edwards gets above 50, or if Abraham gets above you, if you're Risponi, none of this matters. So yeah, you'll fight that battle the next day.
If we just look at the TV spend, Risponi spent about $500,000 more than John Bel Edwards. I mean, the RGA came in pretty strong too with $4 million. Gumbo Pack, Abraham. I mean, this is a lot of money for Louisiana. Look at that, $8 million for Risponi.
Are we just gonna say the word Gumbo Pack and not take that in for a second?
I mean,
that there's a pack called Gumbo Pack.
Are you that surprised, Dave?
I think it's great. I support it.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Go ahead, Drew.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, I feel like it's that thing. It's like, forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Forget it, guys. It's Louisiana. That they do their own thing. God bless them.
Yeah. Some of these ones, like Dantzler, whoever that is, decided to spend $2,942 on cable. I mean, what was he buying a bunch of 30-second ads on TNT at 2 a.m? Like, why? Just throw a crawfish boil and save the money.
By the way, if we want to do that, we really should take a moment to consider some of the other candidates, such as Patrick Livewire Landry or Lundy. No, which one is he? No, it's Landry. It's Patrick Livewire Landry.
Yeah, he spent $23 million. Livewire Landry. Yeah. Do we have any TV commercials from him?
No.
I tried to find.
I don't know if he would even.
I want pull up Dantzler's 2,942 cable buy. What ad did he run there?
It might have been off of his iPhone.
Yeah. Or the Bold Pack put 19 grand on radio. That's a bold move right there.
By the way, I tried to find out what Livewire was about in terms of a nickname.
19,000, Scott.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was any story behind Livewire. Apparently, Louisiana just lets you put names on there.
Yeah.
In some of the other down ballots, I guess people just sort of try and come up with like something that'll be memorable and people will talk about. And so, big shout out to Livewire, because that definitely got a little bit of attention at least.
So one
early vote.
So one interesting thing. Yeah. So I was gonna say, I'm not sure, but I'll just jump in. It looks like East Baton Rouge. Interestingly, Brandon or Drew, correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like the election day precincts are actually coming in before the early vote is, because we've got 41 precincts reporting. John Bell Edwards is at 62.5, which is exactly what his vote goal is. But this is, I believe, election day, not early vote.
You are correct. There are no early votes reporting yet from East Baton Rouge, so those would be day of.
And just so everyone understands, because sorry, this spreadsheet's made for us, not necessarily for the viewers, but we figured we'd share it. So East Baton Rouge, what we're saying here, in 2015 there was 120,000 votes. That's roughly, obviously won't be exactly that this time. That's roughly where we expect it to be. Of that, we've seen 11,000 votes come in, and what Alex was saying is we haven't seen the early votes in yet. So these are precinct votes. So we expect this, with the early votes, probably to start back towards the Republicans. And John Bell Edwards needs to get 62% in East Baton Rouge Parish so that he can be on track to be above 50. Currently, with no early votes in, he's only basically half a point above his vote goal. Still,
Yeah, that was a good job for him. He was at about 41% overall, and he's now up to 46.5%. So
yeah,
he's starting to see some of this come in for him.
yeah. Still too early to tell on a lot of this stuff. Sure, anything else coming in interesting?
Yeah, we're actually right in the process of filling out a few more parishes that didn't have anything in yet and now have some numbers. It still looks like it's quite early for them, but at least we're getting something from most of the parishes now. There are still a handful that we don't have anything from, like Livingston, but filling it in slowly but surely.
Got it. I think again, we gotta get a few more from East Baton Rouge. We'll pull up we'll pull up the precinct map here shortly again, because those are the ones we're trying to watch in East Baton Rouge, Orleans. That'll give us the tip, the real answer we're looking for on where this is going to end tonight. I see Ben, who's in charge of the maps, drinking a beer, which means there will be no precinct map updates.
Oh, just updated it. Whoa.
Ben is drinking a beer, which means there will be no precinct map.
What?
I'm just disappointed, Ben, you did not get us a margarita sponsor for tonight's broadcast. I'm just saying.
I'm working on it, guys.
I'm just upset that did not happen.
Give me time.
Yeah.
One other dynamic. One other dynamic that is more of a big picture look at things. So as of now, it looks like some of the Republican parishes, John Bell Edwards is underperforming in. Some of the Democratic ones, he's overperforming in. That might seem intuitive. It's not. What I'm saying is, essentially, if we were expecting him to be at 35% in a Republican place, he's typically at like 30% right now. And if we were expecting him to be at like 60, he's at 65. What that might be indicative of is, obviously like polarization, but moreover, a little bit of a nationalization of this race. John Bell Edwards outperformed Hillary substantially, obviously, in Louisiana. And it looks like, at least early, it looks like what might be happening is, essentially the Republican areas are that somewhat supported John Bell Edwards last time are not supporting him quite as much this time around. But then some of the Democratic and urban areas might actually be coming in stronger than they did in 2015. We've seen this sort of trend in a lot of states, usually along rural-urban lines, where the urban and suburban areas are becoming more Democratic over time, and the rural areas where Democrats used to hold their own they're just getting wiped out in. So it is interesting that at least early there's like some signs that a similar dynamic might be going on here. So.
Well, and I will say, just to jump in real quick on the concept of kind of the nationalization of this race, I mean, that was exactly the purpose of Trump's rally, right? Was to say, well, even though Louisiana, as a deep red state, elected John Bel Edwards a Democrat, think about this more in terms of the national politics, in terms of your partisanship, and in terms of how you feel about President Trump. And, in Louisiana, President Trump is considerably more popular than he is elsewhere. And if this race is being thought of in kind of those national political terms rather than kind of focusing in on a state level and on the governor's record, then it's going to be a longer night for John Bel Edwards, and that, again, is exactly what Trump's goal was in holding the rally.
All right, looks like we got a pretty big dump, huh, Shore? Where'd that stuff come in?
Well, we are going to pull in those results shortly, and we'll get them into the vote goal sheet. Just to give another update here.
Yeah, we just passed about 400,000 total votes counted, and with that, John Bel Edwards is at 46%, so he's still flying under the 50% mark that we're watching all night. Abraham just edging out Rispone, but again, the night is pretty young. We're at 22% of precincts reported. That number just jumped up again. Now we're at 432,000 total votes cast. And it seems to be, if you look at the parish map that we have on DecisionDeskHQ.com, it is a rather purple map. Purple is our color here for John Bel Edwards. But Ralph Abraham doing pretty well in the central and northern part of the state. Rispone picking up the lead right now as it stands in a few parishes on the western side and in Terrebonne Parish in the south. I really should have studied up the pronunciations of all these parish names.
Where's J. Miles Coleman when you need him?
Yeah, these are kind of tough.
Yeah. I think it'll be, look, if it's coming down to it, and Alex Drew and Paga will speak up, I mean, if John Bel Edwards has a chance, he's going to have to beat his average in St. Tammany, he's going to have to beat it in Lafayette, and he's going to have to beat it in East Baton Rouge. Right now, I mean, he's ahead in East Baton Rouge, but the early vote's not in. We expect that to swing back towards the Republicans. Orleans, there's not enough in yet. I mean, 3%. He's beating his average, but, we got to see a little bit more come in there. And as Brandon said earlier, St. Tammany, he's just got to clear 33% there. He's definitely ahead there, but we have to see how that kind of plays out. Just to give everyone an idea of what we mean by there's so many precincts out and why this stuff's important. Here's our live precinct results that we have here. And you can kind of see we're waiting for East Baton Rouge. We're waiting for more out of Lafayette. Interesting. Look at some of these. A lot of the inner city of Lafayette. We needed more out of East Baton Rouge. I mean, some of East Baton Rouge has come in. We need to see a little bit more of that. We'll see where some of this stuff ends up tonight. But as you can see, there's a lot of precincts coming out where John Bel Edwards needs to do well. Currently, he's beating his vote goals to get above 50%, but we'll see where it all ends up. Looks like we got a little bit more into St. Tammany, a little bit more in Orleans. Still no early vote out of East Baton Rouge. Look at Cato here, man. He's up 30% over his vote call. I mean, there's only 1,000 votes in. I don't know. I mean, for those of you who think John Bel Edwards doesn't have it yet, I'm not saying it's over, but there's still a lot of votes left to count.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So election night watching is an art in and of itself. If John Bel Edwards at 47% right now. Depending on when that East Baton Rouge early vote dump comes in, and depending on how good it is for him, I mean, it might be too late now, but you could have had that dump get John Bell Edwards over 50%, and then you're thinking about this, completely different than what we are. The vote goals. The nice thing about the tracker is that it sort of uh, grounds you in the reality of the situation. The top line doesn't matter very much at this point. 20% of the vote is in, and it's not a representative 20%, or 25% of the vote is in actually, and it's not a representative 25%. It's over half of it is early vote, and then it's sort of a scattering across the state, and a lot of the areas like East Baton Rouge aren't in yet. So it's just interesting that the timing of the dumps sometimes affects how we think about it.
Well, and that's something that I think really sets us apart from some of the other places where you may follow elections, is that if we can, kind of cut through, look at the, top line percentages of, statewide what a candidate has, when it's not a representative sample of the state and it's, misleading. If we can kind of cut through a lot of that and help people see, how to more accurately watch election results and election returns as they come in, that's something that I think makes us a pretty unique place to get your information.
So I might be mistaken, but it looks like East Baton Rouge early vote actually just dumped. It wasn't actually
we can get that in a second.
Yep, and it actually wasn't all that great for John Bell Edwards. It dropped him from 62 to 58. It's interesting. I mean, it's only 41 election day precincts, so we don't know for sure. But John Bell Edwards may actually be overperforming on election day versus early vote, potentially, question mark.
It looks like he had 50,
which is interesting.
He had 57% of the early vote. Risponi had 29, and Abraham was at 12. It was a total of just about 42,000 votes cast.
Sure. Are we dropping anything else in?
Well, that East Baton Rouge dump just got reflected in the parish tracker, and it looks like, as of now, Edwards is about 3.5 points below his goal there.
So it looks like the early vote came in there, and it swung back against Edwards like we thought. I mean, that's the one we're probably going to be watching until the end. We think, in our turnout models, we think there's about 500,000 left in a low turnout election, 650,000 left in a roughly mid turnout model, and about 785,000 votes left in a high turnout scenario. Right now, I mean, just looking at the individual parish turnouts, this is probably going to be a mid to mid high turnout. We're going to go past the low turnout scenario for sure. If it gets close to the high turnout scenario, it's not looking good for John Bell Edwards, at least getting above 50 tonight, but we'll see.
One other note is it looks like we're getting close to the favored. Oh, actually, it literally just went live. The favored counter just went live. So as of now, we have Runoff being favored, not by all that much, by less than 1%. So that would indicate that, as of now, we'd have John Bell Edwards cracking 49%, but not 50%, which is interesting. So now that we have that live, we'll be tracking that as the night goes on as well.
So Alex, you're saying it is going to be close.
Why don't you walk us through how that works out so it's not mystifying?
It's too close to call. It's all going to come down to turnout. And honestly, we should really be watching crucial Waukesha Parish.
Waukesha Parish.
Yeah, Alex, as Scott just said, could you walk us through what this favor bar is doing and kind of what the logic is behind it?
Sure. So basically, what it's doing is it's aggregating all of the parishes together. I mentioned a little earlier on the live stream that it's essentially a weighted average. So, if John Bell Edwards is overperforming in some of the more populous parishes and underperforming in some of the smaller ones, he might still be favored according to this metric. Now, obviously, there's uncertainty around this estimate, so it's close, less than 1%. And we're early. We're only, I think, at about 30% of the vote in. So this will change as the night goes on. But yeah, it's as of now. If things were to stay the same, which they definitely will not, you would have John Bell Edwards falling just short. But it will update as votes get put in.
And we just got another dump of about 60, 70,000 votes, so they're starting to really come in pretty quickly now.
Where'd those come in, Shore? Where should we be looking? East Baton Rouge, didn't get any of them. Jefferson,
Yep, that will be reflected shortly.
Jefferson got a chunk. Okay. I mean, that's what he needs out of there. I mean, if John Bell Edwards gets his Lafayette numbers up, our projections are. I mean, if he closes that gap in Lafayette, it's looking okay. St. Tammany, I mean, he gave back a whole lot. I mean, I guess, what would you expect? He only needs 33% there. He's currently holding strong at 38. All right, let's take a look at some of this precinct stuff.
While Scott pulls up the precinct stuff, it's worth pointing out that LSU just dumped under the 50% threshold. Florida's currently in the lead 27-21, which means no one in the state is going to actually be paying attention to this.
That is correct. East Baton Rouge.
But we apparently do have 87 people, probably outside of Louisiana, paying attention to the parish tracker. So that's interesting.
Well, they're actually, speaking of LSU and football, there was an ad, I think, from Ralph Abraham, where he actually begins by saying, if LSU or the New Orleans Saints went an entire year and came in last place in the league, you would call for the coach's head. You would want the team to get blown up. And yet the state of Louisiana comes in last place in how many rankings, and yet we don't want to throw out the governor. And so, the football fans of Louisiana have been directly appealed to by one of the candidates in this race.
We just got more votes in, so up to about 43, 44% in. Again, we've said a number of times it matters where the votes come from in trying to project this. In the end, though, it's just the totals. But just thinking back to the polling earlier, Edwards is sort of around where people had the race, the Republican race. Now, again, you're going to see this from these outlying parishes come in, and it may change where each of the Republican candidates is doing well, but that's a much closer and higher total between them than polling was indicating.
All right. Everyone's asking us about Lafayette on the chat. Yeah, John Bell Edwards is around 41%. Or no. He needs 41%. He's 27% behind. Only 5,200 votes in Lafayette at the moment. For those of you asking on the YouTube channel, the Twitch channel just memeing the hell out of us.
Where'd the 5,200 come from?
We believe that's not even the early vote stuff yet.
In Lafayette?
In Lafayette.
Lafayette, we're reporting 31K total votes.
So sure.
Yeah.
Put down the beer, man.
Yeah, I'm only as good as the script.
They're about 64% in Lafayette. Orleans is 14%, but obviously Edwards is doing big business there.
Why don't while we pull some of this stuff up and get some new stuff in here, Austin, or can you cue it up? Podcool and Drew kind of give us for all those people who are just joining now, which is a lot of people, race overview, what the jungle primary means, all that fun stuff.
Sure, it's a good point. About 10 after 10, so we've been getting results in for a little over an hour now. This is the Louisiana gubernatorial all-parties primary. It's Louisiana, it's Saturday night, it's a little different. It doesn't matter what party you're in, you run in this primary. If somebody gets 50%, they win. Congratulations. See you in January, I guess, for your inauguration. If somebody doesn't get 50%, then the top two go to a runoff November 16th, another Saturday. And what we're looking at is John Bel Edwards, the incumbent Democrat, a little unique in the South. And he is trying to get over that 50% threshold. There are two main Republicans running, Ralph Abraham, a medical doctor and also a congressman, and Eddie Risponi, who is a businessman who spent about $8 to $10 million of his own money. Both of those candidates were at a rally last night with President Trump. The idea being, doesn't really matter from the national perspective which Republican gets there. It's keeping Edwards under 50% and fighting the next battle with whichever candidate emerged. So it was a unique scene to see the president not necessarily endorsing a candidate, just trying to turn out the vote. The idea being, theoretically, the higher the turnout, the more motivated Republicans are. It doesn't matter who they vote for as long as they keep that Edwards underneath. And right now we're just at about, what are we at now? 45% of the votes. Edwards is tantalizingly close, very much like polling, 46%. Ralph Abraham at 25%, and Eddie Risponi is actually in second place at 27% at the moment. When we talked about this earlier, we're also pretty much well past the 300,000 or so early votes. We're getting a lot of the day of votes now in, and that's really starting to see the trends and give us an idea about turnout.
Sorry, we're just looking at all this. Don't mean to be dead air, but just catching up on what's coming in to see if there's anything interesting. All right, so based on what we have thus far, we think there's going to be a runoff by 1.72%. So that means John Bel Edwards is tracking below our projections. And that's inch down given where we're at. I mean, there's about anywhere from, we don't think it's going to be the low turnout projection. We think it's probably going to be somewhere between the mid and the high, probably a little closer to the mid than the high. But that's obviously a pretty big range. I mean, it is. It's going to be Jefferson, Lafayette, East Baton Rouge. That's where this has got to really come down. East Baton Rouge, John Bel Edwards is 4 points below where he needs to be. Jefferson 4 points above. Lafayette getting killed, but there's not enough votes in there for it to really count.
So just a note on Lafayette. There's a fun alphabetization error there. LaSalle is sometimes spelled with a space, sometimes not spelled with a space. Shore's script uses it with a space, and so those three counties, Lafayette, LaFourche, and LaSalle, are jumbled. We're working on fixing that. All
Yeah,
three
that
of
should be
them.
fixed very quickly.
So
Yeah,
it means
all
Shore's
three.
no longer getting his PhD at UMadison because he can't spell this, right?
All three, just so that the viewers are aware, all three parishes are very close to their vote goal. So
Yeah.
So Scott, you were talking about the turnout and sort of the mid-high. What's that look like? About 1.1 or so, 1.2?
Yeah.
All right, so we're at just it's above 750 or so. So we're getting there.
Hey guys, just wanted to touch base with you after conversing with some of my other friends looking at this stuff here in Louisiana that have been advising me on things. I would say Edwards' odds of winning this outright are slim to none, but they're not quite none. I just have to see a little bit more out of Orleans and East Baton Rouge, but unless there is ridiculous voter turnout for Election Day that's not accounted for here in both of those parishes, he will be facing a runoff. And it looks like Risponi is doing really well in the New Orleans metropolitan area, which still has a good chunk left to report. Seems like Abraham's vote came in early. Most of his parishes came in early and just didn't really bump him over. So if I were a Republican, I would rather be Risponi right now than Abraham. But we still need a little more vote to determine that. We may have a call on runoff or not very shortly. Just waiting on another batch of updates from Orleans and from East Baton Rouge.
Cool, and I'm glad that the tracker is aligned there. The tracker right now has John Bell Edwards projected at about 48%.
And just so everyone understands, that update on John Bell Edwards was Brandon Finnegan, who is our Director of Elections at Decision Desk HQ. He's in charge of the call team tonight, so you're hearing it firsthand from the person that's pulling all this data in, looking at it, and will be making the official calls for us. You're hearing us talk about it, but that's the guy that's going to make the official call at some point. So he thinks it's looking good for a runoff at this point.
Did we get Lafayette fixed yet?
We will shortly. The little details of coding, the fun stuff we do here.
And just to be clear, that's on our sheets. Our election results are fine if you're following along on the Decision Desk HQ homepage. This is our analytics behind the scenes that we're sharing where that bit of coding issue is being fixed.
Just so everyone gets a view, we've got the precinct results in. We do this live for a few folks. East Baton Rouge, so you can see here, it looks like we lost. No, we have if it's gold, it's Eddie Rispone, red, Ralph Abram, blue, John Bell Edwards. Right now we're projecting Bell Edwards to miss the 50% by about 1.5 points. That'll probably widen a little bit, but if he's going to get over 50%, it's going to come out of Lafayette. It's going to come out of Baton Rouge. It's really going to come out of here. This is the area where he won big back in 2015 over Senator Vitter. It looks like he's doing okay, but he's not winning like he was in 2015. So that's kind of why we think it's going to be tough for him to go over 50.
For the trolls on Twitch talking about Excel coding and making fun of Shore, he has an R script that he's running behind the scenes that then feeds into the Google Doc. That's what he was referring to.
I'm glad I'm making new friends.
Shore is also in the process of getting his PhD, and it probably won't happen after this.
You ever know anything about Tensas Parish? It's 16 precincts, probably small. It's the only parish in the state that hasn't reported a single vote yet. It's not going to make or break the election, I wouldn't think.
What are you
But
talking about? That's where they hold all the votes to the end, and they just figure out how many they need.
Ladies and gentlemen of Louisiana, he's joking.
Denmark is a colony on Twitch. Says important to point out regarding the colors that it's easy for John Bell Edwards to color the map because of the divide in votes between Risponi and Abraham. 100% correct.
Excellent.
And actually, Austin, if you could throw on the map that shows the 2015 county primary versus general election maps, those might help illustrate this a little bit more.
While we're doing that, there's someone named Guy Fieri in the YouTube chat, and I just hope it's the actual Guy Fieri.
By the way, I didn't mention this a couple minutes ago. I think we fixed that spelling issue, so everything in the vote tracker should be good to go now. And I'm sure everybody on the internet will make sure that that's accurate.
Yeah. So on here you see that there's as we left.
Moving right along.
Okay. Yeah, Jefferson. I mean, John Bell Edwards is holding there, and Lafayette. It's just these outer ones he's getting killed in. Evangeline, Iberia. He's got to get a whole lot closer. Where's Tammany? St. Tammany, he's kind of holding there. I mean, our projection right now, straight line projection, has him missing the 50-point cutoff by about 2%.
Which again was in line with polling prior to the election. It was, he was 46, 47%, maybe did a little better than thought, but it was going to be close, but maybe not quite enough.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure will thrill Republicans. Gives them a better than fighting chance to pick up this seat, I would think.
So far, there's about 3 parishes, looks like, that are 100% in, and John Bell Edwards is underperforming those 3 by a little shy of 10%. So it could very well be the case that as the night goes on, he might not be expected to actually get to 48 by the end of the night. He could end up settling in the 45, 46 range.
Hey, someone asked a good question. Where was the Trump rally the other night? Is that precinct in? Drew, is that something you can find? We should have had that. That's a good question. We're all Googling Trump rally.
We're all going to end up on the list now.
Oh, it's going to end up on his Twitch page. That's what's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He did just join Twitch, didn't he?
Yeah.
Lake Charles.
Lake Charles. Lake Charles.
And who knows which parish that's in for the bonus round.
Yeah, let's find it. Lake Charles. Charles, Louisiana. Southwest Louisiana, downtown.
Calcasieu?
Calcasieu? What is it called?
Calcasieu? I'm probably butchering that.
Ooh! Let's go to that. Hold on. Bring me over the sheet, Austin. Do we have that precinct, Ben?
Which one is this?
It's in Lake Charles, Calcasieu Parish.
I'll take a look.
Yeah, in Calcasieu right now, John Bell Edwards at 49.9%.
Missing his 50% vote goal by less than
hair.
A hair. So.
But we're still at only 35% of the precincts reported in that parish.
Yeah. Do we have any of those precincts, Ben?
So that's St. Charles?
Yeah. Where is St.
No,
Charles?
Lake Charles.
Lake Charles.
All right.
Give me a precinct so we can pull it up. Oh, it's kind of by Houston. Okay. Pull up the precinct map for me. So where Donald Trump was the other night. Oh. We'll pull it up. Yeah. We gotta go to Lake Charles, which is by Houston, so go west. Probably right around here. Lake Charles, right there. Huh. John Bell Edwards holding off.
I mean, why would we think the rally would impact the precinct? People drove around from all over the state.
Are you really asking whether or not Donald Trump's rallies mean anything? Is that really the question you're asking?
That's actually not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, we don't necessarily assume every Laker fan lives next to the Staples Center. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe a better example is Yankee fans that aren't actually from New York. Person wearing a Yankees hat.
Here's what I don't understand about this whole evening is why would Aaron Boone go to the bullpen right now when Tanaka is pitching?
Podcool, please make your way to the shore corner.
The short corner is a happy place tonight because the Nationals are up 2-0 in the NLCS. So.
All right, let's go back to the vocal thing, Austin.
Yeah, and as predicted, the margin keeps rising. Now we have John Bell Edwards at about 47% projected.
Yeah, 65% precincts reporting, and he's down to 45%.
Yeah.
It was
so
a couple
it
dump
seems
to about 70,000 that kind of whacked him a couple of points there.
Yeah. So I don't think we've officially called it yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon. But it does look.
I don't think. Yeah.
Pretty unlikely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's just not enough votes left. Which, speaking of which, so far...
Yeah, we just got a nice big dump of votes here, so keep an eye on the vote tracker because those will be reflected momentarily.
Yeah. So we're over 900,000 votes in. It looks like we might end up being pretty close to that high turnout. At least if I'm doing back of the envelope math correctly.
Almost all Lafayette is in. He's 4 points below. 3 points up in Jefferson. Big chunk of that. I mean, Orleans. I mean, maybe he gets it in Orleans.
Yeah, just for context, we're at 980K total votes in. In 2015, it was 1.1 million.
Yeah. For back of the envelope math tells me that this is going to be about 1.2 million. But just back of the envelope math. And we just got another dump of about 60,000 votes. So I think at this point in the night, what's interesting is more so Risponi versus Abraham. He has opened up a 3% lead there. Risponi has. So he could, end up pulling this. A few months ago, you would have called it an upset. Coming into tonight, I think I would have personally said that Risponi would be favored. And it looks like the polling was was accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not going John Bel Edwards' way.
Yeah, these couple of batches of votes that have come in the last few minutes have been pretty sour from his perspective.
Yeah. One thing to note on John Bel Edwards. So in 2015, he got 56% of the vote in the runoff. He had gotten, I believe, low 40s in the primary. So this is
He was
this
just
is an
under 40%.
improvement. I'm sorry.
He was just under 40% in the first.
Just under 40%.
Yeah.
So this is a much better performance in the primary than he did last time. Last time it was a similar setup in the sense that it was just him being the main Democrat. There was another Democratic candidate in the race, but he got less than 1% of the vote. Similar setup to this time around where there is another Democrat, but has not gotten very many votes. Difference, of course, is he's an incumbent now. Another difference might be the Trump factor. Trump has not shied away from trying to nationalize races like these. So it'll be interesting to see if what the game plan is going into the general. If they're if the Republicans and Trump are going to be successful in sort of nationalizing the race and making Rispone or Abraham looks more like Rispone at this point. Sort of attach him to the national favorability of Donald Trump, which Trump is still very popular in Louisiana. So we'll see.
Now, Alex, when you say nationalize the race, what do you necessarily mean by that? Especially in a deep red state where we still have some ancestral Dems who are, I guess, coming home to their natural ideological party. I mean, could it be that, or do you really think that it's Trump and national figures entering the race and just playing in a state where they ordinarily wouldn't?
Well, so John Bel Edwards, right? The way that he wins a state like Louisiana, as you point out, a deep red state, is he sort of sticks to state issues and sticks to sort of just his brand, his personal brand, as opposed to the Democratic Party. Um, uh, if the voters are thinking about this race in terms of national politics and specifically in terms of Donald Trump, which Trump has very strong favorability in Louisiana, they are more likely, those ancestral Dems that you point out are more likely to sort of abandon John Bel Edwards and go to the Republican. What sort of mindset is that? It's essentially, well, John Bel Edwards is my kind of Democrat, and so I'm going to vote for him, right? If you manage to crack that mentality, that's when you would start seeing people move away from John Bel Edwards. So, for instance, right, the socialist message. Is a big thing in national politics right now. If the Republicans could paint John Bel Edwards as a socialist Democrat, that would probably hurt him in a state like this. And so it's sort of a give and take where John Bel Edwards is trying to stick to his personal brand and sort of that mentality of, oh yeah, he's the right kind of Democrat, and the Republicans are going to try to say that John Bel Edwards is the same as Nancy Pelosi, is the same as Bernie Sanders, is the same as AOC. And so it'll be interesting to see, what takes shape. in recent times, and by recent times I mean 2018, 2016, I would say that I think the Democrats in those positions have won the day for the most part. So people like Joe Manchin, who is personally very popular in West Virginia, and won his election last year despite it. There are some people who didn't, right? Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, for instance. Um, and you can even flip the script too, because Republicans have faced sort of the opposite in a lot of moderate districts over the last couple cycles. So a lot of the moderates survived in 2016, even though a lot of suburban voters flocked to Hillary because Donald Trump was on the ballot. A lot of those House Republicans that are moderate and in districts that ultimately voted for Hillary survived that. And then ultimately in 2018, they were wiped out.
So just so everyone knows, if you're looking at it, obviously, I mean, we think John Bel Edwards is probably not going to break 50 tonight, although we haven't called that yet. What's interesting?
We have.
Go ahead. Eddie Rispone looks like is currently sitting at 27%. Ralph Averson at 24%, which that's the other. I guess everyone's fighting to go after John Bel Edwards in the primary. If you look at the polling, Eddie Rispone was within the margin of error ahead for most of the polls leading down the stretch. So with the exception of one poll where he was 1 point behind. So I don't think we're too surprised to see Eddie there, especially when we look at some of the spend on this stuff. Where's the spend here? Snapshot. Look at this spend. Rispone had $8 million in television, cable, and radio, whereas Abraham had 1.9 million. So, Rispone buying a spot in the runoff is definitely a phrase we can use here. Although for a dollar-for-dollar efficiency, Abraham's sure making it close. Again, $8 million for Rispone, 1.9 million for Abraham. If you look at the polling average slide, Rispone held a slight lead despite outspending Abraham 2-1, and currently he's ahead 27-36. 27-36 over Abraham. I don't think anyone's too surprised Rispone's going to be able to pull this off and get to a runoff, are we?
I mean, it's in line with what the polls seem to indicate would happen. So in that sense, it's not terribly surprising.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a few months ago would have been surprising, but I guess that's what was it, $8 million can do for you?
Yep. And we're able to officially call it for runoff now. Currently, our runoff tracker has projected Edwards to sit right at about 47.5%. It certainly looks like I need you to switch to that.
It's already on.
Oh, okay. It looks like it's going to obviously be the mid turnout model, pretty close to the high turnout model.
Actually, if you look at a lot of the counties that are at 100% reporting, it looks like we'll actually be pretty close to the high turnout estimate.
Yeah. Certainly the mid and pretty close to the high.
Well, and what becomes interesting here is something that I think Scott mentioned earlier, which is, how does the finish tonight for Edwards translate to his prospects for the runoff? And I think that, for Edwards, if he came into this and missed 50%, but missed it, at 49%, that would be a much more comfortable spot for him. But if he is down closer to 45, 46, something like that, that's when he probably starts to really sweat.
Yeah, just for those who are asking, we're not calling a second place winner. We're just calling it's going to be a runoff. But if we had to guess the second place winner, we kind of teed it up. We think it's going to be Risponi.
If you look at margins right now, Rispone has built up a 33,000 vote lead over Abraham. We think there's probably roughly 200,000 votes left to count. So I mean, Abraham's in a tough spot.
And again, not surprised. He got outspent 3-1 on media. All but one poll had him 3 or 4 points behind. In a high turnout situation, it's going to favor the higher media spend person. And John Bell Edwards is going to underperform his 2016 numbers, 2015 numbers.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that is just the uniqueness of Eddie Risponi's candidacy. You know, being able to self-fund to such an enormous extent so much of that advertising, just because he came in with as a successful businessman in construction, having, so many millions to loan to his own campaign really came up big here.
So one thing to think about in terms of the general election is, in 2015, the Republicans weren't able to coalesce around their candidate, David Vitter. So Edwards increased from the primary to the general election by about 16 points. Now, 16 points is probably not in the realm of reality this time around. He's at 40, rounds up to 46 right now. We're projecting that he'll end up in 47. Let's say he ends up with 47. He will just need to pick off 3%, an additional 3%, which would come primarily from Abraham voters, but also you've got close to 1% who voted for the other Democrat in the race, Oscar Dantzler, and you have an independent candidate with about 0.7 of a point. So I mean, there's not a lot that John Bell Edwards needs to grab in order to win this in November. The thing that will probably make a difference and might allow Risponi a chance here is just time and the campaign. There's about a month until the runoff, and a lot can happen between now and then.
There are also slightly different dynamics at a state level in this one, namely that there isn't a very unpopular Republican incumbent in the governor position right now. So that certainly was something that helped Edwards the last time, was that he was running while Bobby Jindal and his administration were extremely unpopular. And so slightly different set of contours to this race.
It looks like Brandon just called Eddie Risponi as the second candidate in the runoff. So we will have John Bell Edwards head-to-head with Eddie Risponi about a month from now.
And Alex, I think you're right that what will be interesting to see is the extent to which Republicans are willing to coalesce around Risponi. Will he be able to get the Republican base and Republican voters behind him in a way that Vitter wasn't able to do last time? And, the extent to which he is or isn't successful in that regard is going to have a tremendous impact on who ultimately gets to occupy the governor's mansion.
So we have officially called the race for John Edwards and
Yep.
Hear you, Brandon.
I'm sorry, what's that?
You broke up.
We've called the race for John Bell Edwards and Eddie Rispone, who will advance to the runoff against Edwards. Rispone's support was more distributed throughout the state, and more importantly, it was concentrated in high population areas, high Republican voter areas along between East Baton Rouge and New Orleans in the suburbs of both areas. That simply wiped out Abraham. You can see that Eddie Rispone's lead keeps growing. It's now about 37,000 votes. It'll probably erode a little bit as some rural places come in. There's still plenty of the metro areas to roll in to keep padding Rispone's lead. So, yeah, Edwards probably will creep up a little bit more. I don't think he's going to make it to 48% at this rate, even though Orleans is still left out because there's a lot of rural areas left out too. But yeah, they will be running off against each other on November the 16th.
Cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks, Brandon. We'll leave the sheet live. Obviously, the results will stay live until they're all completed. All of our operators will be working until this is done, so please check back on the website. Thanks for bearing with us as we, slightly inebriatedly work through all of these things. We'll have a precinct map. Actually, let's pull the precinct map up because the precinct results were another thing we're playing around with before we sign off tonight, so everyone can kind of see. Live precinct results are something we're going to be diving into pretty deeply next year, and you guys are going to see a whole lot more of this stuff. But tonight was kind of a test case for all that. As you can see here, here's Baton Rouge. Again, John Bell was really needed to pull it off here. Here's Southwest Louisiana. He really needed to win these precincts down here, what she won back in 2015. This is the reason why he's going off to a runoff against Rispone in the month. But yeah, here's the precinct map. We'll probably have an after action about this, and we'll push this on the website so you guys can kind of see this stuff again. It's a little bit nerdier than we normally have. But before we sign off, Drew, you got anything else you want to add?
No, it was pretty much, I think, what polling expected. It was not a huge surprise tonight. And we'll be back for regular election day for Mississippi and Kentucky governors, November 3rd, I believe, and then the 16th for the runoff here in Louisiana.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.